Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and today I've got a very interesting first-hand story from at the time, serving Army officer who witnessed an extraordinary hovering UAP over one of the most sensitive military installations in the United States. Welcome, Mr. Caison Best, to Reality Check.
Thanks for having me, Ross. Yeah, appreciate it.
Let me give you first a bit of a bio on who Caison is. He graduated from West Point in 2016. He was the captain of the men's tennis team. He was commissioned as an infantry officer. He became an Army Ranger, Airborne, Air Assault, Space Cadre qualified, served as a platoon leader and company executive officer in the 82nd Airborne Division. He was a combat infantryman in Afghanistan in 2019, and he was attached to the Special Operations Task Force in Afghanistan. In 2020, he served as the Special Operations Task Force Future Operations Officer, responsible for coordinating all Army Special Forces combat operations in the country. Quite a role. He transitioned to be an intelligence officer for the 10th Special Forces Group and was a military intelligence detachment commander responsible for 65 intelligence personnel during the sighting he's going to tell us about in February of 2022. He served as the senior intelligence officer, the SIO, for the Special Operations Task Force Europe, responsible for managing all Army Special Forces intelligence activities in Europe. Now, he's left the Army and he's just graduated from the MIT MBA program. And in his spare time, as if he actually has any, he works very closely with an organisation I'm extremely proud to recommend, what is in fact the world's largest UAP organisation by membership, Americans for Safe Aerospace. It's a military pilot-led. It's led by Ryan Graves, the well-known former fighter pilot who went public with what he knows about the UAP mystery. And Ryan Graves has created this quite extraordinary organisation that's dedicated not only to UAP transparency, but also the issue of the national security and flight safety concerns raised by unauthorised incursions in our airspace, notably and particularly with a focus on UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. So having introduced Caison, I want to take you, Caison, to even before you tell us about your sighting, what was your original thought, your view, if you had one, about UAPs?
So I didn't have any background on the subject really much at all. I'd seen a couple of episodes of Ancient Aliens growing up, found it intriguing. I read some sci-fi novels from maybe age 8 to 12. But other than that, this was a subject that was very much not on my radar until February of 22.
In terms of the importance of incursions in military facilities, what were you taught as an intelligence officer about the importance of reporting phenomena or objects, strange objects, over military facilities? What was the kind of standard operating procedure?
So just my personal experience, we weren't really taught much of anything on what to report as far as, UAP or anything like that. I mean, common sense dictates that if there is something that you don't understand in vicinity of a sensitive site, it's best to report to a security officer or somebody responsible for that site itself. But other than that, there wasn't much.
So let's take you to 2022. I think the date. What was the date that this incident
February
occurred?
15th.
February the 15th of 2022. Talk me through the day. What are you doing?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of a special day. It was about a week before the Russia-Ukraine incursion, and my old unit, 10th Group, is responsible for the European area of operations. So we realized that day that the invasion was imminent, and we were about to be very much gainfully employed over there. So that morning, we get into work, we do a normal thing. We get a order from our group headquarters saying that there's going to be a snap intelligence brief at the group headquarters at, if I remember correctly, 11 a.m. that day. So I was commander of the intelligence detachment for my battalion. I got my second in command with me, and then three other intelligence analysts. And at around 10:45, 10:40, we started making our way to the quick walk up to the group compound itself.
Now, where you are, you're right immediately adjacent to the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, which is a huge military base in Colorado Springs. And for anybody who's watched the War Games movie, which is my generation, it's the location where, in the good old days, the war would be run from. The nuclear war would be run from. It's the old centre. It's no longer used as the primary centre for controlling a response to a nuclear attack or monitoring our northern aerospace, but it's the primary base in its old days of NORAD and NORTHCOM, the North American Air Defense and North American Command of the US Air Force. It's an extremely important, secure military base, isn't it, Caison?
Absolutely. And the 10th Special Forces compound is on Fort Carson, which is kind of in the shadow of Cheyenne Mountain, right across the highway. The mountain itself, the peak is 6 miles away. So you're kind of always looking at it if you're facing west.
But this whole area would be regarded as highly secure airspace. You wouldn't allow just any incursion with a drone or a blimp or any kind of aircraft without it being authorized as a military authorized aircraft incursion.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Base Complex is, I would say, probably top 5 most important and secure facilities we have.
So you're moving from the 10th intelligence group's headquarters or base to a location where presumably you're going to be doing some kind of a briefing in a skiff, correct?
Yep. So me and my 4 other personnel, we're just going from our battalion skiff to the group headquarters skiff, which is about a 5-minute walk if we hurry. But our headquarters is in kind of a depression. And so we had to climb a series of stairs up a hill, just a grassy hill, to get, along our route to the group headquarters building. And we made our way. You can't really see the mountain itself when you're at the bottom of that hill, but we're facing west, the direction of the mountain. And when we got to the top of the hill, already over the mountain and kind of naturally in our field of view, when we got to that location, was the UAP.
What did you see?
It's hard to describe. Even now, just a few years later, it was unlike anything that I frankly could have made up. And I'm not the most creative person, but it was a massive, perfectly still elliptical object. And the stillness was just shocking. Like it was almost tied to a fixed point in space. If I were to guess, and this is hard to say, 6 miles away, but I would guess maybe 300 feet at least. Elliptical like this, white in color, comprised of these uniform panels that seemed to be all pentagons, but were all irregularly shaped. They were joined at the seams, the linear seams, and these irregularly shaped but uniform in area pentagonal panels were like a mother of pearl or a white ceramic color. And it was a perfect sunny Colorado bluebird day, 50 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. And you could see these panels move as they kind of glisten in the sun.
What did you call the object? What was your nickname for it?
So we didn't have a nickname. Maybe we'll get into it a little bit later, but Arrow, their office nickname for this object was the crystalline potato.
Crystalline potato.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It didn't seem like it was made of crystal, but it did have a kind of a reflection to it.
I think you've told me previously it had kind of a mother of pearl look to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All the panels were the same. And again, they were kind of seamed at the linear edges of all of them. It was in a pattern that just did not make sense. Like, because you could tell that there was 3-dimensionality to it.
Three-dimensionality.
It was a pattern that was hard to comprehend.
To the paneling. Forgive me, 3-dimensionality to the paneling? Is that what you mean?
To like the skin of the object, to the topography of the exterior of the object itself. Like you could very much tell that the object was 3-dimensional and elliptical, but then it had like topography along it So like kind of peaks and valleys that were comprised of these panels.
So I appreciate the object was 6 miles away over Cheyenne Mountain, one of the most secure military complexes in the world. Um, can you estimate its length and height?
Yeah, again, this is probably the most uncertain aspect of the observation, but I would say at least 300 feet in length and then maybe 150 feet in height. Very large.
It's a clear blue sky day.
Perfectly bluebird. Anybody who's been out to Colorado, the day after it snows, oftentimes it's just shockingly beautiful. There wasn't a cloud in the sky for 360 degrees.
So, how high off the ground at the top of the Cheyenne Peak would it have been hovering?
Yeah, so Cheyenne Mountain itself is comprised of two peaks with a saddle in the middle. On the like, if you're facing west, on the left peak is an antenna array, and so it's pretty much right over that antenna array, a little bit to the right of it. If I were to guess, again, this is hard to say, but maybe 500 feet above.
Can I ask you this, Caison? You've said that this was a particularly geopolitically crucial time because this was in the days in the run up to the Ukraine war. It's interesting to me because I've done a report about a base in Australia, Northwest Cape, at the time of the 1973 October Middle East War. And there was an object that was recorded by two individuals, including the US Deputy Base Commander at a US base on the west coast of Australia, seen hovering at the very moment or around the time that the White House made the decision to go to DEFCON 2. It was an incredible moment in world history. It was one of the first and only times that they've gone that high in the defense condition for nuclear war. Were there alerts ongoing at the time over Cheyenne Mountain? I mean, essentially, if there was going to be a conflict or a conflagration, this is where any intelligence would be gathered to know about it, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. From like a nuclear security standpoint, it's a critical piece of infrastructure. Fort Carson and 10 Special Forces Group did not really interact with Cheyenne Mountain, so we didn't have any, really day-to-day interaction ourselves. But I'd imagine they'd be on a heightened alert status of some sort.
Right. So, but in particular, without revealing obviously what you were discussing in the skiff, was there any particularly enhanced defense condition at that time that we're not aware of publicly?
No, nothing that we discussed.
Right. So, how many men are with you as you're looking up at this object, and how long do you see the object for?
Yeah, so all five of us, myself included, we get to the top of the stairs and we're naturally looking at the mountain, and already over that saddle is this object. And having somebody who's been in combat, when you have a truly unique experience, you kind of get that tunnel vision and just the shock factor. And so we were all just transfixed on what we were seeing, trying to perceive it. But enough time elapsed so that we had shared some expletives, confirmed that all five of us saw it. We're able to postulate what we may or may not be seeing. So if I were to guess, at least 30 seconds.
Now, help me here. Please tell me one of you whipped out a phone and started filming.
It's a good question. And, from the nature of going from one skiff to another, we didn't have our phones on us. But frankly, it was such a shocking experience that I didn't even think of bringing out a phone, even if I did have it.
Can I ask you this, Cason? A lot of people tell me when they see objects like this, is there any awareness of the object anywhere else on the base? Or is it only you five that are in the open air able to see this object? Do you have the sense? A lot of people have told me they have the sense sometimes that these objects appear to be showing themselves to them and nobody else, and that sometimes it looks as if nobody else can actually see what they're seeing. Is there any reaction anywhere else in any of the military complexes adjacent to this object?
So the top of the stairs is a parking lot. That's where we were located. We didn't see anybody else in that parking lot, but it was 30 minutes before lunchtime, so it was pretty quiet naturally. If I were to guess that it was 30 minutes later that we observed this object, it'd be very much crowded. We couldn't see anybody else around us, so it would be just speculation, to be honest. But the one thing that strikes me is that this object was very much already there and stationary before we came into the line of sight for observing.
I mean, somebody must have known about it, surely.
I mean, if I were to guess, that's kind of what I expected. So after this sighting, just trying to make sense of it, I think myself and probably a couple of the other individuals looked on Reddit, looked on local news, kind of expecting somebody would have said something about also seeing it, but we didn't find anything.
When you went inside after you'd seen this object, did you report it?
No. So, and we were going into a very high stakes situation with that brief. Our unit commander was there. It was kind of all hands on deck. There was, pressing business to be discussed that was extraordinarily important in itself. So that was absolutely not the time to say anything about it. But frankly, like, I should have been listening much more to the brief than I was. I was still trying to make sense of what we had observed.
Okay, this is weird. I mean, it feels weird to me as an outsider that you've just witnessed an obvious incursion by an unknown object over an extremely sensitive military base. Do you think it's normal that you didn't feel a compulsion to report it?
I'm not sure. Like, I can just share what my thought process was. It wasn't doing anything. It wasn't like actively damaging the base that we noticed or anything like that. I kind of figured at the time that, hey, if there's any site in America that's going to have their airspace under control, it's Cheyenne Mountain associated with NORAD. I mean, that's kind of their job, is to have national airspace under control. So I figured, like, hey, we observed something. They observe pretty much everything that's flying in the sky. Somebody knows what's going on. And frankly, and this is not an excuse, but I kind of just had the perspective of, this is extremely hard to comprehend, and I have a lot on my plate at the time too, dealing with the conflict.
No, I'm just fascinated. It's no criticism of you, by the way, but I'm often fascinated by the psychology. It often baffles me how people respond when they see these objects. If they have cameras, they often don't use them, and when they go inside, they often it doesn't really occur to them to report it. It's weird. It does make me wonder sometimes if the phenomenon is doing something to people's brains to actually stop them from taking an interest in it.
I'm not sure. I didn't, feel any description of having an interaction with the object while I was observing it. It was just more shock than anything, and it still is years later, just a lot to process. And I feel very fortunate that I was with four other individuals who are highly credentialed, because it was unlike anything I could have ever really made up.
Did you get any noise from the object? Was there any visible propulsion system?
No, I mean, it was a completely silent day to begin with in our local area. No wind, quiet as can be. There was no sound coming from the object itself. It was 6 miles away, so who knows if it was emitting something, but we couldn't hear anything.
And was it moving at all, or just staying completely stationary?
So the object, is almost like its center of mass was just tied to a point, as I said before, but you could see the panels that comprise the objects kind of rippling across it. Like if you had a still pond and dropped little pebbles at disparate locations, there'd be like points of origin where the ripples would go across the object itself. And then it was so blue, the contrast of the whiteness along the blue sky background was so obvious that you could see the edges of the object like move as the panels rippled. But the object itself was perfectly stationary.
Some witnesses often describe a plasma of some kind. Did you see any kind of distortion or plasma around the object?
No, not at all. It was very much three-dimensional. You could see shadow along the edges. You could see shadow along the topography of the panels itself. And it was that mother of pearl on the panels and then perfect blue next to it.
Was the sun in such a position that you could see whether there was a shadow cast on the ground by the object?
So it was midday. We couldn't see a shadow. I don't think from our location being under the mountain, we'd be able to see one even if there was one.
So You guys walk inside. How long is the briefing, the skiff briefing?
About an hour.
When did you sit down with your colleagues and do what you've told me you've done, which is prepare a report on what you'd seen?
Yeah. So again, as I previously stated, we became extremely busy as a unit because of that briefing. But even with that, the very next morning, I was compelled to at least put our information that we had gathered on paper. So I sat down with myself and brought in three of the four other individuals to just make sure that what I put down was corroborated by themselves. And they tweaked a little bit of the notes. They have their own perspective, but we put notes to paper within 24 hours.
And so the PowerPoint that you very kindly shared with us, that's a PowerPoint that you prepared with the corroboration of three of your colleagues, literally firsthand the day after the event.
Correct.
And what that shows is absolutely gigantic. I mean, if this was 6 miles away, this would be an absolutely gigantic object hovering over what was a very sensitive military facility. What did you do with that report, Caison?
Not much of anything. I'm not trying to make excuses or anything like that, but I didn't really know what to do. And, I would like to say that I had the ingenuity to start digging around on compartmentalized platforms to see who I could report it to or something like that. I kind of wish I had, but I didn't really touch anything until getting back from my last deployment and finally reaching out to Ryan at ASA.
So while you were in the military, you didn't report this incident.
I did, but a year later.
A year later. And who did you report it to in the military?
Yeah, so I reached out to Ryan. I had seen him on a podcast. I thought he came off as quite credible, and I just asked him for advice of where should I go, because anybody who's worked in a government building, there's panels and flyers everywhere on saying where to report certain things, but I'd never seen a flyer on where to report UAP. And we at that point, several of us had looked on classified systems, trying to find some sort of white paper or something, some sort of guidance. We couldn't find it. And so it took me reaching out to Ryan to get some advice. I initially reported to ASA, and then he directed me to some emails associated with Aero.
So ASA being Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is a not-for-profit private organisation set up by Ryan Graves, a former military pilot, that investigates national security, flight safety concerns posed by unauthorised incursions in airspace, and particularly by unidentified anomalous phenomena. Ryan refers you on to ARROW, which is the Pentagon's UAP UFO investigation office, the all-domain anomaly resolution office. Is ARROW receptive to your report? Do you send them a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yeah, so this is June of 23. When I reach out to ARROW, I send them absolutely everything I have. So written statement of what occurred, along with maybe 4 slides of the PowerPoint that I created, so the entire PowerPoint.
What's their response?
I wait for a month or two. I don't hear anything back. Kind of put it on the back burner of my mind as well. And then one day I'm checking one of my computers and I have a response from them with something along the lines of THX-AARO. So thanks, Aero. I think there was a sentence along with it too, like saying they received the copy, but that sentence, the only thing I remember of it is that it had typos in it. So I've worked with most agencies within the intelligence community, quite a few agencies in the Department of Defense. I've had generally very professional experiences. This one stood out as shockingly unprofessional and unlike any other experience I'd had prior.
Why would you say that? What was unprofessional about it?
I had figured, since it took a month or two for them to reply, that they were just busy. Just the fact that it even just like words weren't capitalized. Like it wasn't even grammatically correct. It was terse. It was blunt. And I had figured, like, really the only reason why I had submitted them in the first place was the UAP's association and proximity to Cheyenne Mountain. I figured, if anything was a national security issue, this was going to be it. And I figured that they were going to take it to some sort of seriousness and look into it just because of that fact.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I would hope and expect that the Pentagon, which is after all entrusted with the defence of the United States by the Commander in Chief, the President, I would have thought that as soon as you, somebody with a very important intelligence background working in special forces, told the Pentagon that you had witnessed an extraordinary anomalous object hovering over one of the most sensitive military facilities in the United States, if not the world, I would have thought they would have come running.
Yeah, I just expected some level of basic due diligence, frankly. And when I didn't observe that, I was kind of shocked and a little frustrated too.
What did happen?
So not much came of that. I ended up getting out of the service a few months later, going to start my new life in the private sector, going to business school. Didn't hear anything back from them until early the next year, maybe around February of 24. I received a message on LinkedIn from an individual who worked at Arrow, asking if I was available for a short conversation. Happily took the call. It lasted about 15 minutes. The person was nice as could be, professional, but very much obviously not a trained interviewer. But we had a conversation nonetheless. I informed them that I was here to help as much as I could and didn't hear anything back for another few months. And until I got an email on my student email account, and it still shocks me to this day, but a picture of a PTID system, which is a surveillance balloon that anybody who's deployed has seen dozens of times, and a statement saying, "Hey, we think we have found what y'all observed. Is this what you saw?"
What did you say?
I replied along the lines of, "Hey, I am absolutely here to help if you want to take this seriously, but if you're not going to, please don't contact me."
So you made it very clear that you did not think it was a balloon.
No, and I don't think that they thought I thought it was a balloon either.
Do you think they thought it was a balloon?
I can't speak for them.
Do you
I
think
have
they
no
could? Do you
idea.
think they? Do you think they could plausibly have concluded, based on what you told them, that it was a balloon?
No, and frankly, with the access to information that I assume they have and had at the time, I think it was just kind of disingenuously dismissive.
Can I ask you, what size do these PTIT balloons go to, and is it plausible at all? Let's consider for a moment the possibility that it was a balloon that had somehow drifted into that airspace. Why isn't it plausible that it was a PTIT balloon?
Yeah, I mean, and to their point, like that is probably the closest prosaic explanation as far as an object that we have to what we saw. A PTID is, I think, if I remember correctly, 115, 125 feet in length. This object was noticeably larger, and I had seen, as well as the individuals with me, I had seen PTIDs hundreds of times. Having deployed, having been close to the U.S.-Mexican border where they're also located, I had seen them up close. I had seen them at a distance, and this object that we saw was absolutely not a PTID.
And presumably, unless the balloon was moored, like tethered over Cheyenne Mountain, which there's no evidence that it was, I presume it would have been moving to some degree, even though it was a windless, fairly calm day, as you say.
Maybe not. They are large objects. They are tethered, and they're designed to be stationary to collect ISR. But it goes. I think the starkest thing, aside from just us being able to observe the UAP for a long duration and get a really good look, is that the UAP observation for us concluded with it instantaneously disappearing. And I've seen PTIDs, get moored and go back down to their location on the ground, and it takes a while. It takes several minutes at the soonest. Our observation of the UAP that we saw is we had 5 set of eyes looking at it, and then in one instance it was there, and the next instance it was completely gone.
Do you think it moved, or do you think it literally disapparated?
it's so frustrating because we don't have like a solid conclusion of events. The quickest, whatever happened, it happened instantly. We didn't see it fizzle out. We didn't see it blink away. We didn't see the object shoot off at rapid speed. It was just there one moment, and then it wasn't there the next. And our location is on a hill, and we can see 360 degrees, pretty much to the horizon, except to the west where Cheyenne is. And we looked around instantaneously, and it was nowhere to be seen.
And presumably, Caison best, just to exclude this possibility, Petit balloons don't disapparate or disappear instantaneously in the way that you're describing.
No, they go up or they go down, and both of those movements are very slow.
Were you happy with the finding? Clearly you weren't, but I need to hear it from you. Were you happy with the finding made by Arrow that this was potentially explainable prosaically as a Petit balloon?
No, and I'm someone who, you can ask my wife. I'm someone who's quick or slow to anger. It takes a little bit to get me frustrated, and I was just genuinely kind of frustrated and disappointed. Like, I'm not one to send terse emails back to an office that I haven't met before. But I was kind of, I don't know, their response to what 5 intelligence officers saw in broad daylight was just so dismissive that it gave me the impression that they were not acting in good faith.
I mean, I have to say, if anyone's trained to surveil for aviation intelligence, it's guys like yourself. You're taught how to look at objects in the sky, aren't you, as an intelligence officer?
Well, I'm not professionally taught, but 2 of the individuals with me were geointel analysts. They spend months in the schoolhouse learning that exact trick, which is identifying everything that flies in the sky. So,
And that raises the next question. To your knowledge, at this time, when Arrow was doing its investigation, did it make any effort to interview anyone else from your team?
not to my knowledge, and they had their names.
So those geo-int experts could have provided their expertise to bolster your opinion that this object was indeed anomalous.
Totally, for sure.
And Arrow did not solicit or seek that information.
Not to my knowledge.
What happened next? You obviously decided that you weren't happy, didn't you, with the result that you got? You took it to another agency. What happened?
Yeah, so Ryan had some connections within the FBI, who started taking this topic seriously as well. And so he referred me to his connection there. And frankly, the experience was night and day. I was in an internship by the time that we got connected, but they very quickly put me into a field office to get a formal debrief, formal interview, and then they brought a sketch artist along as well to try to, capture the rendition of what I particularly observed.
Were your colleagues interviewed by the same FBI team?
I know for sure at least one. I'd imagine others as well.
So the GeoInt specialists, were either of them spoken to?
Yes.
Do you think the FBI is taking your sighting seriously?
I do, and I don't know the conclusion. I'm out. I'm not using my security clearance or anything like that, so I don't really have the access to have the answers of what actually occurred. But ASA is partnered with the FBI. We've mentioned that loosely, and just from my interaction working with ASA and working with the Bureau, they are absolutely taking it seriously. And I don't necessarily know to what ends, but our interactions have been nothing but professional.
Caison, can you explain to our audience why should this sighting be taken seriously? Why should the FBI, as an agency entrusted with federal law enforcement, why should it care about an issue like this?
Yeah, to my understanding, it's part of their charter. It's part of their mandate. They are the organization that is chartered to protect national security sites within the continental U.S. They have counterintelligence programs as well, where if this was an adversary of ours, they're the organization that would look into it. So it's kind of naturally part of their charter to look into any sensitive site incursion, whether or not it's UAP related.
How much of an impact has that sighting had on you in terms of perhaps altering your worldview about anomalous phenomena?
I mean, it was something that I didn't think about really ever. To really, I think the number one thing is just it was a humbling experience. I mean, this object was just so unlike anything I could have ever imagined. Like I can relate to the whole thought process of being a caveman and seeing an iPhone for the first time. It was just a shocking object. Just the engineering of it was incredible. And anybody who has certain level of credentials is naturally going to be inclined to get a little bit hubristic and start to think that they maybe understand how the world or universe works to some degree. And this experience just was frankly humbling in a good way.
Is it possible the object was a cloud?
No, it was very much solid and very much three-dimensional. And there weren't any clouds anywhere in the sky.
Let me doff my hat to Mick West on the way through. Could it have been a bird?
No.
So it's still a genuine mystery, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations is investigating it. That investigation's still ongoing?
I'm not sure.
It worries me, Caison, that institutionally, at the very time that you were doing this sighting and in the months subsequent, there was an order made, wasn't there, by, I think, the Deputy Secretary of Defence requiring personnel to report sightings. So it's just as well you did. It's interesting to me, were you aware of that order that had been made?
No, the only reason that I was aware of the order, I was talking to Ryan in 23, and he gave me the perspective of, hey, when you're trying to make the decision on whether or not to report, just so you know, the Northcom commander has made a general order saying if any service member has seen an object that they think is anomalous, they have to report. And so that was pretty clear to me, like, hey, I have the green light from a 4-star general to report. Let me go find that document. And again, having access to TS level information, secret level information, I went on these databases and it was hard to find. Like, I mean, most GOs general orders are posted on chalkboards. This thing was buried.
So all in all, I don't want to whack Arrow too much, because I do know that Arrow does have some great people in it. And I'm still waiting to see how Dr. John Kozlowski, the new incumbent director, handles these kind of issues. One can only hope that they're handled more seriously than what you're describing. You ended up working with Ryan Graves at Americans for Safe Aerospace, essentially doing the research lead role, filtering people coming in with specific sightings, didn't you?
Yeah, and it was a long journey. This is a sensitive subject with, where trust is the cornerstone of anything that we're going to create. So I had known Ryan for over a year before he asked me to start running the witness reporting program for ASA. And not to speak for him, but I think one of the main reasons why he did is I was an individual who had kind of gone through that pipeline. I had spoken to Arrow, I had spoken to the Bureau. I had an intelligence background, so understood analysis to some degree. And I think what I brought to the table is the humility and the empathy to understand what witnesses are going through, especially professional witnesses, and when they make the decision on whether or not to report.
How big is the stigma even now, even with that Northcom 4-star general's order mandating reporting? There's still a stigma, isn't there, against reporting anomalous phenomena?
For sure. And I think it depends on the communities within the intelligence community as well as the DoD. So, for example, I don't think the stigma is as high for somebody who's on the ground like myself and the 4 other individuals. I think the stigma is probably much higher within the military aviation community, for example. But it definitely exists. And the kind of the perspective for, I think, a lot of people, myself included, is, there's not really much in it for you to stick your neck out and report something that's anomalous, unless it's due to, a safety hazard, like my own example, or like an aviator who sees an object in airspace.
By any measure, what you're describing was certainly a grave national security incursion by an object that does appear to have been anomalous and defies prosaic explanation.
I mean, I'm not sure what the intent of the object was, but I don't think a massive object is supposed to be floating over Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Base.
And you're clear about this. You think it was some kind of technology, advanced technology, from what you saw.
Oh, for sure. And it's a crude analogy, but it was very much engineered. Almost like when you look at a Apple AirPod case, it's just kind of like beautifully designed. Like this thing was beautifully designed, but almost incomprehensible. Like I still don't understand how the pattern of those panels worked, how they rippled, what they were made of. I mean, there's so many questions.
You've rendered a kind of an ovoid shape. Was it an ovoid shape or was it slightly more cylindrical?
No, it was oval. It was elliptical in nature, and it was generally symmetrical as far as like the length and the height goes. But again, it was comprised of these panels that had the peaks and valleys to it that made the shape not perfectly symmetrical.
Right. When you finally got to Americans for Safe Aerospace and you started going through the reports from military and civilian pilots and other personnel who've come to ASA with their reports, were you surprised at the detail and the volume and the quality of what you were seeing?
Yeah, I mean, my first line of duty when I got into the database was to see what Ryan and his team had collected, just to get myself caught up. And there were already a few hundred reports in there, and I mean, profound. Like I'd only had my experience plus what I had seen in some certain databases in the IC, which are pretty confirmatory in themselves. But then going into the database, like there's just so many anecdotes of trained observers seeing very clear observations, oftentimes with media attached. It was a lot to take in itself.
And let's go through some of those cases because what I find intriguing is you've been working with ASA in the very period when these unexplained object incursions, I refuse to call them drones because I don't believe they were drones,
Fair enough.
at least not drones in the normal sense. But there were these extraordinary incursions of drones over the entire continent of the United States, parts of Europe, and also the UK, but most notably publicly, and we focused a lot of our stories on this, around New Jersey, upstate New Jersey. Do you have any intelligence in the ASA archives on objects that were seen in and around New Jersey?
We do. And to your point, it's not just New Jersey. I think that's kind of a geographic stigma that was attached to this phenomena. It's all over the continental US. And, you know, we are Americans for Safe Aerospace. Most of our reports, not all, but most come from the continental US. We've seen them everywhere. And from my perspective, just seeing you're just running this program, there seems to be disparate phenomena occurring. But as far as like the New Jersey drone story, it seems like there's a particular, I guess, UAP category that is a key aspect of what is occurring, surrounded by just a shroud of, I guess, noise to the signal.
Now, you've very kindly provided us with a couple of videos, and I'm going to refer to these now. There was one from the 12th of July, 2025 that came in from some witnesses. They recorded video footage of some anomalous objects in the sky. So this is 12th of July. That's actually only a few weeks ago in Hooksett, New Hampshire. 2 civilian witnesses, 2 minutes duration. The objects were 200 feet away. 2 brilliant ruby red contained spheres of light described as a basketball-sized condensed sun contained within a 1 meter clear sphere. The witness would like to be credited as Lou N on the video. Talk to that one, Caison. Can you give any explanation, prosaic explanation for what that object might be? Could it be an aircraft or a helicopter or a drone?
I mean, not to my knowledge. And this object is one that has been described to us in several reports, over a dozen, as far as a category goes. And that category is a contained sphere of what is often described as a condensed sun, just a ball of some sort of plasma or energy or light that is either red, like in this example, orange, or a brilliant white.
And was this characteristic of a lot of the purported so-called drone reports that were being reported over the continental United States?
It is, yeah. So I would say this is one category of objects that are associated with what we would call the New Jersey drone situation. And then there's another category of orbs as well that we
So
can get into if you'd like.
can I go into it then? Look at that object. As we're looking at this image, certainly if we're looking and we're 200 feet away, there's no noise. There's no jet propeller. There's no propellers. There's no turbine. These objects appear to be completely silent. There's no visible means of propulsion, is there?
Correct.
What the hell are they? I mean, I don't know why we're calling them drones if they don't show any kind of visible drone propulsion system.
For sure. And there's definitely a drone response from what we're seeing with ASA. There's a lot of civilians who are launching drones in response to what we would consider as UAP, like this example. There seems to be some sort of federal response as well in response to the UAP factor. And so there's a lot of uncertainty and noise around what I would say is the core nexus of what is occurring, which is just undescribable.
So what's particularly significant to me too is that these objects are still being seen, and I'm glad you've confirmed this because I get an enormous number of very similar sighting objects coming in, videos coming in from witnesses right to this very day, and people still talk in government as if the drone so-called sightings only occurred in December, January, February. They're ongoing, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. It's more just tied to the media cycle with the stories seemingly kind of losing traction, but the sightings have not decreased whatsoever.
There's a gentleman in Florida, and I'll doff my hat to him. He knows who he is, Sean. He sends me almost daily videos of identically anomalous objects hovering over his property in Florida. Let's go to the next video that you're talking about, the 2nd of February 2025, and on the 9th of July 2025, 3 law enforcement officers in the Minneapolis area, 2 hours duration for the first sighting, 4 minutes duration for the second sighting on video, an amorphous, rapidly changing blob of light and energy-emitting colours throughout the visual spectrum, long duration positive lift, and then travelled approximately 40 miles in 5 seconds. Wow.
Yeah,
Got any
so
comments about that?
Sure. I mean, this is describing one witness who reported for the 2 others in the MSP area. They're law enforcement officers. The first occurrence in February, they observed this object from a hill where they were conducting training for over 25 minutes before having the time to go to I guess, a higher location, which was a parking garage, where they observed the object just floating in the sky, sometimes moving slowly, sometimes being stationary, and then sometimes moving rather quickly, but linearly. And after about 25 minutes, also, from my recollection, on that parking garage, a helicopter got within, near vicinity of the object. I don't think the helicopter was aware of its presence. And then the object, as described by the witness, moved 40 miles north in the span of 5 seconds. And then they were still able to observe it there. And so one of the law enforcement officers got into his squad car and drove in that direction for, I think, over 30 minutes, observing it the whole time. The 2 individuals who are still in the parking garage observing it the whole time. And then it concluded.
And I'm going to ask you the obvious question. I presume your GeoInt friends have told you. Is there any known object in any inventory known to you that can move 40 miles in 5 seconds?
Not known to me.
I mean, that's probably tens of thousands of kilometers an hour, isn't it?
Sure. And then going to be, perfectly stationary for extended duration after that as well.
The second sighting in this same sequence of sightings portrays the same object 5 months later within several hundred meters of the witness. And he says it was close enough to see flashing lights rapidly rotating around the object. And notably, the witness said he provided his videos to Asset. Who are Asset?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But essentially, he's asked for anonymity. I'm intrigued. Did these law enforcement officers present their findings to Arrow, to the official UFO UAP investigation office set up by the US government? And if not, why not, do you think?
Not to my knowledge, but I do know that they reported it to the Bureau.
And is the Bureau investigating their concern?
Yes.
Fantastic. Big tick for Kash Patel, by the way. The FBI seems to be getting some teeth that the Defense Department isn't. I wonder why the Defense Department seems to be deprioritizing strong and rigorous investigation into UAPs. It's obviously an oversight they'll need to correct, Susan Go. The other thing that you want to tell us about is the sighting by a professional aviator, a 40-year professional aviator with 20 years in the US Air Force, including high-altitude platforms, 20 years as a commercial captain. Over the past 18 months, the witness told you he has personally observed several dozen instances of orbs maneuvering at extreme velocity along massive racetrack routes within the continental United States and exclusive economic zones. The witness states, like several other commercial witnesses, that almost all of his colleagues consistently observed the same phenomenon, sometimes with multiple objects flying around a main orb, sometimes just a single brighter orb. The witness also describes one instance observing a smaller orb coming down in a dive bomb from the larger object at extreme rates of speed to a Delta 737 flight 15 miles distant. The object then fish-hooked directly under the Delta flight at extreme proximity and then darted back to the larger orb. The instance occurred on a flight from Dallas to Minneapolis, and the objects were observed for 2 hours prior to the incident. Now, we're going to cut now to a video which shows one of the larger orbs heading east, and then you'll see it here fading in the rapid racetrack pattern. This object was observed by the pilot for 20 minutes, and the video was shot approximately 10 minutes into the observation. The city lights, that's Oklahoma City down there, flying northbound at cruising altitude. This is a very heavy-duty sighting, Caison. This is somebody with a huge reputation in professional aviation. Is there any prosaic explanation that you can cite for those objects?
Not to my knowledge. And, this individual is a senior captain. He felt compelled to reach out to us because he's in a leadership position, and he figured if not him, then who, which I can absolutely commend. And the only thing is this individual is not alone. This is one example of, as he stated, most of his colleagues are observing and more consistently.
Let's deal with one thing first, Caison. I'm really struck by the conflict between what the White House has said through Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokeswoman, where she has asserted that the objects that were seen, particularly over New Jersey, were all Federal Aviation Administration authorized research drones, or drones being used for other purposes, unspecified. She never said what. Do you find that explanation plausible for the objects that you are seeing and being reported?
I don't have all the information. I can only speculate on this, but just based on my experiences in the DoD and the IC, I find it doubtful.
Doubtful. Let's look at the admissions made by 2 US Air Force generals. I think one of them was the serving Northcom NORAD commander, and the other one was the previous one, General Glenn Van Herk, and General, I think, is it Jeffrey or Gregory Guillot? I can't remember the correct first name, and I apologize if I got it wrong. But both of these gentlemen went with Bill Whitaker on CBS 60 Minutes a few months back, and they flatly admitted they had no bloody idea what these objects were. Clearly, the White House can't be right, and the US Air Force generals in charge of defending North American airspace can't be right. They're contradictory, aren't they?
You never know. Again, it's speculation on my part. You just don't really know who has the information and who doesn't. I like to think that there's somebody who has an understanding of what's going on, but I'm not sure.
Do you believe that? I mean, I notice Eric Burleson has come out today and tweeted. There's been a tweet reporting that Eric Burleson has said they're embarrassed to admit they have no idea what these objects are, so they've just called them drones. In your experience in a military bureaucracy, does a military bureaucracy like to admit that it has no idea what an object is if it's incurring military airspace? I would have thought that
For sure.
I would have thought any intelligence officer would want to get to the bottom of this aggressively, like a dog on a bone, and find out what the hell it is.
Yeah, I'd imagine just depending on the level, right? Like, the individuals who are doing the field work probably are like that, where they want to figure it out. For example, our partnership with the FBI. But incentive structures change when you're at higher and higher levels of bureaucracy.
Is it possible that this was the object that you saw, or that the objects that people are reporting over New Jersey or other parts of the US? I mean, could this be some kind of elaborate US military or intelligence operation that we're not being read into, that even you, with your former security clearances, aren't aware of?
It's possible. The intelligence community is an onion with many layers. Just because you have an extremely high clearance, like I previously did, doesn't mean you have all the answers. So it is possible, but I like to think if that's the case, then, we are just doing a great job. But then it begs the question, why are all these, what is definitely a breakthrough technology, sequestered?
That's the next big issue. I mean, what you saw was by any definition highly advanced breakthrough technology, wasn't it?
Shockingly so.
Does the lack of curiosity by Arrow concern you?
It does. It goes into, trying to explain why they don't have that curiosity. My mind goes to, hey, this seems like an example of the fox guarding the hen house, the DoD guarding itself. And so they really wouldn't have the incentive structure in place to try to come to the truth and be public about it anyway.
I know there's been speculation from Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who's principally involved as the chair of the one of the committees that's oversighting a lot of this stuff. She's expressed concern and skepticism about whether Arrow is doing a sufficiently rigorous role investigating cases like this. How many of the cases that you've had come to you at Americans for Safe Aerospace, how many of those people, especially the military witnesses, have gone to Arrow?
To answer the question, I'm not sure if it's none, but it's very few.
So there's almost a disincentive for military witnesses at the moment who are, I think, actually required to report to Arrow if they have a sighting. They're not doing it.
I'm not sure. There might just not be overlap between individuals who report to ASA and who report to Arrow. So I'm not sure what information Arrow has collected or hasn't. But the individuals that report to us, they don't seem to go to the DoD.
Do you have a conclusion that you've been able to reach about the anomalous objects that you've had reported to Americans for Safe Aerospace? What's your impression as an extremely highly accredited intelligence officer, former with the US military? What's your impression of what's being seen over the continental United States, even to this day? And should we be concerned about it as a national security issue?
So we don't have any defined conclusions, that's for sure. But just from our vantage point of what we've been reported to, it seems like there's highly likely multiple disparate phenomena occurring. We see a wide gambit of shocking technologies that are observed. We have no assessment of the origins of those technologies, but it's not just, one or two different types of objects. It's pretty encompassing, and they're demonstration of technological advancement is profound.
And former Army Captain Intelligence Officer Caison Best, in your view, is this a national security concern that we don't know what these objects are for sure?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, as somebody who has been in the national security space my entire professional life, like I don't think there's any problem with trying to identify what's going on. Like from a national security perspective, maybe there's some individuals who do know what is occurring and they have a good reason to keep it secret or not. I have no idea. But from a security standpoint and from an intelligence standpoint, you have to collect the answers before making decisions.
So if people do have sightings, either civilian or military, and they want to take it to an organisation that's prepared to investigate it rigorously, how do they get in touch with ASA, Americans for Safe Aerospace?
It's very easy, safeaerospace.org. There are several locations to report. If you click onto that website and fill out a report, it will go straight to our database where we will take a personal look at it. And our reputation is founded on taking witnesses' privacy seriously and treating them with the courtesy and professionalism that they deserve.
And you're a former military officer. Ryan Graves is a former military officer. This is an organisation set up by, former serving military, people who might be reticent because of national security concerns can feel safe that you will be acting responsibly with anything they provide you.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the only thing that we have is our reputation. And if that is damaged, then our efforts to this point are kind of moot. So we take this entire subject as seriously as possible and guard our witnesses' identities as much as they want.
Caison, what are we doing wrong? Like, obviously, there are people coming to your organisation and Ryan Graves' organisation, Americans for Safe Aerospace, with these reports. What's going wrong? Why is the official reporting system not working?
I think the official reporting system, if you're referring to Aero, I think witnesses, especially in the military, are probably aware, just based on Aero's actions, that they're not operating in a genuine fashion. So I feel like the incentive structure just doesn't really exist. From a formal standpoint, the FBI seems to be doing a much more professional job. And then an organization like ourselves at Aero, we're just trying to fill the gap and be that third option for witnesses to report in a safe environment that's going to be taken seriously. But with that said, based on discussions with aviators especially, we think we have just scratched the surface of reports that professionals have observed.
This is a much larger phenomenon than is being officially acknowledged or reported.
For sure.
And Caison, are you going to be continuing your work with ASA now that you're working in the business world?
I am, yeah, as long as Ryan will let me.
It's impressive that somebody with your background, especially with your intelligence training, wants to work with an organisation like ASA. Why do you think it's so important?
Yeah, I mean, I had my own personal experiences. I think ASA is filling a extremely important niche as far as being a citizen nonprofit that is taking this situation seriously. And the UAP phenomena, from my perspective, is as valid as any. I frankly don't really care what other individuals have to say about its legitimacy or not. Based on my 3 experiences of being in the IC, having my own observation, and working with ASA, I mean, this is worth my time even as a volunteer.
Well, I think everybody watching this would like to thank you for your service and for your continued contribution to ASA. I think it's an extremely important role. Before we go, have you given evidence to any congressional committee, and would you be willing to testify to the Congress if you were asked?
Yeah, we have provided evidence to several committees. We continue to do so as of recent as well, and I am happy to testify.
Are you being asked to testify at the forthcoming September hearing?
Not to my knowledge.
But there are people like you and many of the people in the wings at ASA who are former serving military, often at very high levels, who are willing to testify about the anomalous phenomena that they've witnessed?
I can't speak for others. I would like to think so. This subject is one where there's not much personal gain involved. So it does require a level of what I think is courage to do what you think or compelled to think is the right thing. I'm happy to do so, and I hope others are as well.
Well, Caison Best, former Captain Caison Best of the US Army Special Forces, I, for one, want to commend you for your courage and thank you very, very much for speaking to Reality Check.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross.